Greetings. In this video, I'm going to do an install and review of the Fedora Kenoite distribution. This is an immutable distribution based on the KDE Plasma desktop. I've done, in the past, I did a video on an immutable distribution, specifically Vanilla OS. It impressed me enough to give Kenoite a try. If anybody's watched this channel, they know I'm not really a Fedora fan, so this is sort of a step out of my comfort zone, but since Kenoite is using KDE Plasma and it is an immutable distribution, that actually canceled out several of my objections to the Fedora itself that I've had. For those who are GNOME fans, Fedora also makes a Silverblue, which is another immutable distribution based on the GNOME desktop. For me, in a lot of ways, the GUI or graphical user interface is far more important than the actual distribution you're using. If I'm running servers, I generally do command line. If I'm doing a special purpose server, like my WordPress development server, I usually put in a Windows manager. But when I'm going with a full desktop, yeah, KDE Plasma over GNOME for me. Not saying that's the same for you, but that's the way I look at it. So I'm very happy to give this immutable distribution, Fedora Kenoite, a test, even though I'm not really a Fedora fan. So we'll see how it works out. Okay, let's talk about Fedora Kenoite. That's, as I said, it's a mutable or atomic distribution. It's what Fedora calls a spin, and a spin is where they take their distribution and they put a different desktop on it, and they call that a spin. For example, the default Fedora workstation uses GNOME, but if you want KDE, then it's the Fedora workstation KDE spin. I guess technically Kenoite could be considered a spin of Fedora Silverblue, which is a spin of Fedora Workstation. They both use GNOME. Or Kenoite could actually be considered a spin of Fedora Workstation KDE spin. Yeah, I'm going to stop going there. Anyways, again, as I said, I prefer the KDE Plasma desktop metaphor to the GNOME one, but I'm not here to foster my views of desktops on anybody else. If you like GNOME, that's great. But before jumping into this too far, we should talk about what an immutable distribution is. And you'll hear words like immutable and atomic to describe these various distributions. Basically, and this is a very simplistic view, this is taking a Linux distribution and making it kind of like Android in a certain way, in that your operating system is a container or a single block. You usually have two copies of the operating system, the one you're using, previous one, or the next one. And when you want to upgrade, you just switch from one version to the other. Or when you want to downgrade, you switch back. This means that the upgrades are downloaded in one entire block and installed in one entire block. There are advantages and disadvantages to this. One of the disadvantages is how much space it takes up. One of the advantages is that everybody gets the same in a immutable or atomic distribution, and if it works one place, it should work everywhere. So, as I said, I'm not a Fedora fan, but having KDE in the Kenoite distribution knocks one of the blocks off my objections to Fedora, which is that they use GNOME pretty much exclusively except in their spins, but again, not here to argue desktops. The other block that's been preventing me from using Fedora in the past has been that, how to say this, Fedora doesn't play nice with doing things the way I want to do it. Same with like the GNOME desktop. GNOME's reminds me of Windows in this way the developers want you to do it, not the way you want to do it. Well, same with Fedora as a general rule. For example, last time I installed Fedora, well, a couple last times, when I try and set up the partitions on the hard drive myself, and I don't have that 600 plus megabyte partition for EFI. Fedora refuses to install properly. Even though when you do have that 600 plus megabyte partition, it's only like 5 or 10% filled. So, like I say, I usually use 512 because that's what I use in every other distribution, but that's neither here nor there. The fact that I'm using immutable distributions means I am purposely giving up some control, which is one of the downsides to immutable distributions. So here I am giving Fedora Kenoite a try. So we need to download it first, we need to install it, and then we need to play around and test it. Okay, before downloading, let's go ahead and take a look at the system requirements. We can jump over to the requirements for Fedora Workstation, as I couldn't find anything on the Kenoite site for actual requirements. But here you can see we've got 2 gigahertz dual core processor, 2 gigabytes of system memory, 15 gigabytes of drive space. This seems a little light for a immutable distribution, but that's what I've got, unless somebody can point me to where there's actual hardware requirements for Fedora Kenoite spin. And as long as we're here, recommended 2 gigahertz quad core processor, 4 gigs of memory, 20 gigs of drive space, yeah. Resolution 800 by 600 higher, 1024 by 768 screen resolution, yeah. And minimum requirements for the graphics card. All right, pretty standard stuff. I think from here we can jump into VirtualBox, and we can work on our configuration of VirtualBox for this. Okay, let's jump over to the actual Fedora Kenoite website and let's take a look around. We'll go ahead and we've got the download right there. So some generalized information. This is where it tells us using the RPM OS tree. I didn't have to do some research on that. These are the other spins for immutable distributions down here. We talked about Silverblue. There's Sway Atomic, Bungee Atomic, etc. Okay, let's go ahead and start the download. Normal way to do this, we'd use Fedora Media Writer to write it to a USB, but since we're using a virtual machine, we'll load directly from the ISO. And if it was me, I've never used Fedora Media Writer, I would probably just open a terminal and DD the ISO to a USB stick, or depending on your operating system, use something like Rufus or Etcher. Anyways, we want to go ahead and download our image. So we want the x64, 86, 64-bit one, and it's about 3.5 gigabytes in size. So while that's downloading, let's go ahead and poke around their website a little more. Introduction, about this guide, OS installation, known bugs, something you probably want to read if there's known bugs. Yeah, quite a list here. I've looked through some of these, and yeah, depending on your use case, some of these might actually be issues for some people. Like for example, the OpenH264, I'm not real clear on that, but it could be an issue for streamers and bloggers. Technical information, talks a little about OS tree and RPM OS tree. File layout. Ooh, forbidden packages. And installing drivers. Yeah, standard stuff here. It's good to read this before you actually install it. You can save yourself some problems. And you got nothing better to do while it's downloading. There's some features in here for KDE I haven't really used. I'm going to have to look at though, I guess. Now we just got to wait for the download to finish. Then we can move on. All right, now that we got it downloaded, let's go ahead and fire up VirtualBox and create our virtual machine. So new, Fedora Kenoite. Select the ISO. We're not going to do an unintended install. Hardware, let's go with 8 gigs of memory. 4 cores on our processor will enable EFI. And we'll give ourselves 100 gigs of hard drive space. Note this is virtual hard drive space. We'll only use as much as we need, but it will keep adding more to the file until it gets that big. And once we save that, let's go ahead and jump back into settings. There's a few more things we want to look at and change. Let's give a description so we know what this is all about. Date. Let's see. Since we're using EFI boot, we're going to make sure secure boot's not enabled. There's no need for it on this one. Looking through here, display. Let's crank our display memory all the way up since it is a desktop. Not going to worry about acceleration at this point. And I'm going to switch over to a bridge adapter. I want to be able to see this from the internet or from my local network anyways, and if I did NAT, it'd be hidden behind a virtual router. So that looks like about it for the setup. We can probably go ahead and save this and then start the actual loading of the virtual machine. So let's go ahead and hit the start button. Let's arrange our windows a little bit here. Takes a little bit to get to the startup screen where we choose our language. So that's first stop. Here's the setup. We need to basically configure our local disk. I'm not sure why it didn't happen automatically. There's only one disk. And set up our accounts. So we'll go ahead and select our disk. And we'll leave it automatic and let Fedora handle formatting it. I'm going to create a password for my root account. And I'm going to create a non-root account. And yes, you can argue about it, but this isn't the place to argue about whether you need a root account or just a user account with sudo. Once that's done, we'll go ahead and hit the install button and let the install go. I'm going to speed through this a little bit so you don't have to wait around. It took about 8 minutes for it to install completely. Then the system reboot. So to get to this point was about 15 to 20 minutes. Not bad, considering VirtualBox will log in, and the way the window's acting, I'm thinking VirtualBox guest editions are already installed. All right, that's a good thing. Okay. We'll take a quick look at our welcome center here. Yeah, some basic information, some of the installed options. I haven't used Vault or activities. I'm going to have to look at those. I know they were in KDE Plasma, but I've never used them on Arch. So they're set up here. Yeah, worth a look. Discover is our software store. Ooh, look at here. We've got our telemetry. I'm okay with this because it's disabled by default, but let's see what the various levels of telemetry will get us. Yeah, I'm going to go ahead and leave it disabled. Going to definitely enable third-party repositories, though, for drivers and things. And authorize, and that's it for setup. And yeah, looking at this, definitely the guest extensions for VirtualBox are installed. And we have updates waiting. I kind of expected that. These are our locations: FlatHub, Fedora, firmware vendor. Yeah. Okay. Let's look at our updates. That's actually not too terribly many updates. I was expecting more. That looks like the new Kenoite version down there. We'll just go ahead and install everything. Yep. And while that's installing, we'll go ahead and poke around in the KDE Discover software store. Got all our standard apps, although I'm noticing this was something I read in the problems. The ones that are listed for the Fedora, or the Fedora repository, they don't have icons, while the FlatHub ones do. That's kind of interesting. I notice we don't have a ton of apps installed by default, which is also good. One thing different here is the firewall is installed. Configuration looks reasonable for a desktop, so I'm not going to mess with it. Like I say, like Arch or Debian, you usually install that by itself separately. But in Fedora, it's already installed. So, okay. Once our downloads are complete, we need to restart the system. And this actually didn't take more than 35 minutes to get totally set up. You take a little look at our structure. We're using 11 gigabytes out of our 100 gigabyte, or technically 99 gigabyte drive. So not as good as Arch or Debian, a lot better than Windows. Okay. Standard configuration options. A decent selection of widgets. Panel settings. Yeah, everything's here. Browser. Okay. Yeah, I'm going to go ahead and play around with this for a couple days before I finish up this video. So yeah, it looks pretty good so far. I'm actually kind of impressed. Okay, like I said, I'll play around with this for a couple days, load some stuff, add some applications, things like that, and then we'll come back and we'll do a conclusion or epilogue to this video. Okay, I've been playing around with Kenoite for a few days now, and for not being a Fedora fanboy, color me impressed. I'm actually pretty impressed with this release. I mean, there are some issues, but overall, it's been running actually pretty well. I tested out with a couple different printers, a couple different scanners. They worked out of the box first time. No fancy smancy setup, no command line stuff. I loaded a few packages. Kenoite uses the RPM OS tree, which is slightly different than regular RPM. I'm not overly familiar with that, but it does work. You also have the option of installing Flatpaks, which do work. I installed a few like LibreOffice and GIMP via the RPM OS tree or the actual Fedora repositories. I installed Steam from a Flatpak. It worked. And once I installed Steam from a Flatpak, I went ahead just for a test to download Fallout New Vegas. And to my surprise, without any fussing or messing around, it actually started up and ran the game. So, like I say, color me impressed. I mean, there were some mouse problems and the fact that I'm using a virtual machine with limited video memory. Yeah, there was some clunky display, but I mean, it started up, it loaded, it actually started the game without me having to futz with it. So yeah, like, wow. So to let you know how much I am impressed with this, I'm now seriously thinking about redoing and reconfiguring my laptop with Fedora Kenoite, as opposed to I'm using Arch right now. I mean, just to give it a try. I mean, I'm running a dual boot right now with Windows because like once a month or maybe twice a month at the most, I have to log into Windows for some specific purposes, and it looks like Fedora Kenoite might actually fill that gap. So yeah, I'm thinking about it. Don't know if we'll get there, but I'm getting close. We'll see. So I'd like just to remind everybody to, if you enjoyed this video, please like it, please subscribe and comment. I'm always interested in comments. Funny thing, my grandniece texted me. She said she found this channel, my channel, this YouTube channel, and she called me an influencer. I said, no, I don't think so. I've only got like a dozen followers. She said, no, you've got almost 500. What? Actually went and looked in the YouTube thing, the studio, and yeah, wow, almost 500. I'm totally shocked, and I just want to thank everybody who's followed me and liked my videos and comment. I've gotten lots of comments through YouTube and through other sources, so thank you to everybody. It's great to be appreciated. Anyway, we'll see what the next video is about. I've got a few ideas, but I haven't gotten onto anything solid yet. But if you have any suggestions, let me know. Until next time.